smells, and touch and sight. But you also have to hear what's going on. That balance of all five senses. Tipping point where you can do just about anything. With our candy, we look back in time. We go back to the 1800s, the Victorian period. Many of our bits of equipment were made in that time period. We're pretty much the only one who has started up again using this sort of equipment, tracking it down and restoring it. Today we're going to be making sugar plum drop candies, eggnog image candies, and peppermint candy canes. First, we do the candy canes. The first thing we do is we cook the sugar. It's mixed with water, and we're boiling all the water out. We need to use two sugars to interrupt the crystallization process, sucrose and glucose. If we just use sugar and water when it hardened, it would turn back into table sugar and become granular.
Hot pot?
We have a team of 5 candy makers here at Lofty Pursuits. Hurry and Jake were working with me today. Everybody in the store knows when we make peppermint candy because peppermint has a weird reaction to your skin. It makes you feel cool.
If anybody was in any way slightly congested or had any letter of allergies at this point, they will not after that.
25 pounds of candy canes only take less than an ounce of peppermint oil. When we make candy with multiple colors in it, we add the food coloring on the table. We do this so we can segment and separate the different areas of color. One of our specialized tools doesn't look like it's a tool. It's a giant table. The top is made out of a 1/2-inch piece of steel and has a water circulation system in it. We use it to rapidly cool the hot sugar. Where it comes in contact with the table, it will cool off quickly. But the bits not in contact don't cool that fast. So by folding the candy together, we get to even out the heat and pick the temperature we want. We may want it to act more like a liquid or more like a solid or somewhere in between.
All right, we're getting real close to stretch time.
Next, we make the amber sugar white. This is a hand-wrought iron hook. It's thicker than most of the other hooks that we encountered. This lets it radiate the heat better, so the candy is less likely to stick to the hook. We have several hooks in the store, but the one that I used today came from a store called Mullane's, which was opened in 1848 in Cincinnati. We changed the amber into white. We pulled it about 75 times. Each time we folded it, it trapped air bubbles on the inside. Those air bubbles were great because those little round bubbles reflect light back out, and the random light that they reflect appears white. Then we start making the stripes on the heating table.
Make sure my stripes are super even in thickness.
Candy canes didn't always have stripes. The first candy canes were white. Actually, if you look at Victorian greeting cards, which is the best way to look at the history of candy canes because they showed up on them, it wasn't until the late 1800s the first stripes came out. And this is partially because people thought of peppermint as a white color.
I'm just waiting for these two to actually get stuck together.
One of the things about candy that we have to be careful with is the colors will migrate from one part to another. In the candy canes, if they're too hot, the red would actually bleed into the white parts of the candy. We don't want this to happen. We do this by controlling the temperature, and the only way we can really tell the temperature at this point is by feel. We know how stiff the candy needs to be, and that just comes with practice.
In we come.
The batch roller twists the candy as it forces it down the taper. We don't want it to go too far, but it's kind of useful in this case to a point because it puts a spiral on the candy cane.
The first candy cane is born.
We add a spiral with our hands, but we do it at the machine first. Then we add the hook on the candy cane. The hook on the top of the candy cane is made by bending it. If you think of this, it's behaving like a tube. The inside white is softer than the outside, so we have to bend it very carefully. We use our hands in a very similar way to a tube bender that a plumber uses. Then we have a little guide we use to make sure they're all a consistent size. And that's how we make candy canes. Next, we'll make the drop candy. We start the process the same, boiling the sugar and adding the flavor. The sugar plum is a drop candy where everything is the same color. Everything else we did use multiple colors. Because of this, we could cheat a little. We could add the coloring and the flavoring in the pot at the same time.
Hot pot.
And when we poured it on the table, we could pour it thinner and over a larger surface area so it would cool faster. It just speeds up the candy making process. We can tell by the texture of the sugar, the temperature of the sugar, and then we add the citric acid, because citric acid will burn if the sugar's too hot. And the citric acid is the acid that makes the flavors right. Most of these flavors come with no acid in them, and most fruits have acid in it.
Just gets like impossibly thin.
The problem with teaching candy making is it's all about touch. The consistency changes constantly. There's one point that we want to cut it. We want to cut it when the outside is hard and the inside's still liquid, so we can average out the temperatures.
You can see it's like starting to become a little bit more compact.
But then when we want to manipulate it, we want it more of a clay consistency when we're doing the initial shape, but we want to get it harder to keep the shapes once it's done. It went from a liquid to now it's behaving